Good morning or afternoon, and welcome to the Envision IT Extranet User Manager webinar on Extranet and Office 365 and Azure B2B. My name is Peter Carson. I'm going to be presenting today. I'm the president of Envision IT, also a SharePoint MVP for the last 6 years, and a partner seller with Microsoft Canada. My contact information is up on the slide here. We're going to be sharing the slide deck up on both our Envision IT and extranetusermanager.com sites, so you can pull all that information down afterwards. We're also recording the session, so if there are folks that aren't able to join us, can certainly on demand pull down the recording. That should be up there tomorrow at some point. We'll send a follow-up email after the session as well. Also here at Envision IT, we've got Dinesh Sohan, who is our Director of Products. He runs the Extranet User Manager development team. We've got on the line Logan Guest, who is on the sales side of things. If you have any questions around licensing, trials, deeper discussions, one-on-ones and such, Logan's your guy from a go-to point of view to help organize that. All right, let's start with a quick agenda. We're going to begin with a background to Extranet, just level set everybody in terms of what we're talking about from that point of view. We're going to dive right into Azure Active Directory B2B, or business to business. So this is the technology that Microsoft has released. Came out in preview about a year ago. They did some major updates to it in Ignite just the week before last that we'll talk about. And then we'll get into the Extranet User Manager and how that layers on top of that, what sort of features and benefits it provides on top of B2B. Then we'll get more into governance and permissions from a general SharePoint Extranet perspective, touch on licensing so you understand what are the implications from that point of view, and get into a live demo from an Office 365 point of view. We'll take questions throughout the session, so feel free to post them out. Moderators will be answering those. If there are ones that can't be answered until the end of the session, I'll try and hold a few minutes to follow up on those. Overtaking that, we'll provide responses after the session. All right, let's dive right into a little background on what is an extranet. So an extranet is a website that's accessible to users outside of your corporate network. So typically this is something that you would use to share information or to collaborate with your customers, maybe your partners, vendors, lots of different use case scenarios from that point of view. It is secure. The idea is that you need credentials to be able to get into it. And it can be delivered in a number of different ways. You know, it might be an extension of your public-facing website, could be your corporate intranet. You decide to publish a portion of that out securely, or it could be a standalone extranet. And we've got examples of all three of those scenarios that we can share with you. If we look more specifically, I mean, that was generally from an extranet point of view. If we narrow in to SharePoint extranets, what do those typically look like? They really fall into two different categories. Either it's a secure publishing portal, so you've got resources that you want to make available that are not appropriate from an anonymous public point of view. You want to provide some credentials to allow people to get those resources. Or you want to create a collaboration space where you can actually interact to document management, collaboration back and forth, not just within your own team, but with external partners. In terms of where that could live, it could be that you're running SharePoint on premises or up in the cloud in Office 365. And if you're using our Extranet User Manager product, it can also be installed on premises, or we can host it for you in a multi-tenant environment we host in Microsoft Azure. So a number of different scenarios through there. So what are examples of some typical extranet users that we see? You know, it may be a members portal, customers, vendors, suppliers are very common scenarios. We do a lot of work for not-for-profits, charitable organizations, so volunteers, donors fall into that category. Lots of organizations have board of directors. Perhaps you're a government organization, you're reaching out to citizens, educational or research, tenants from a property management point of view, partners from a co-selling or partnering perspective. So lots of different scenarios. And it really applies regardless of what type of organization you are. You know, whether you are a not-for-profit charitable, whether you're a government organization, or you're a for-profit, either private or publicly traded company. As we're looking to deploy an extranet for a client, what are some we'd like to think about, and questions that we ask early in the conversation? The first one really is who is coming into the extranet. If you think about the previous slide, you know, is there one or more of those folks that are going to be coming into the extranet, and how's that going to work? Is everybody going to see the same information? You know, you've maybe got a volunteer or donor portal where all the same private information gets shared out, or maybe it's a customer portal or a partner portal where it's specific to each of those relationships, and they're going to see specific customer or partner information in there. Is there some sort of member database that we need to interface in with? Are you running maybe Dynamics CRM or Salesforce that we want to keep that membership profile information in sync with? Or do you have maybe donor, you're using Blackbot or other donor registration systems? How do we wire that in as part of that? Next point's an important one. Is it an invitation-only site, in which case you know exactly who you want to collaborate with or who you want to publish with, and you're going to send them invitations out? Or can people self-discover and self-register for the site? Can they come to it, see the login page, click a register link, and go through a self-registration process? If that's true, typically there's some sort of approval around that. Some of our clients have open self-registration where they just need to capture credentials. In fact, we do that on our own extranetusermanager.com site. If you want to download the trials or see more of the detailed documentation, you have to register. We don't approve it. It's immediately approved. You can then log in and pull that information down. In other cases, maybe it's just a single group of approvers that approve all registrations, or maybe it's more complex than that, where depending on what you're registering for or how you register, maybe there's a profile drop-down that defines a role or a group or an organization that drives where that approval goes to. So we can make that as simple or as complex as it needs to be depending on the business requirements. And is it just the SharePoint extranet that they're coming into? Is there other systems as well? We support single sign-on, allow you to allow authentication not only into SharePoint, but into your own custom developed applications, third-party SaaS applications, etc. Okay, so from a technology point of view, obviously we're very focused in this talk on Azure B2B, so Microsoft Azure is sort of front and center on that. SharePoint and Office 365 are a big part of that as well too, though. And then there's our Extranet User Manager product. Like I mentioned before, we can host that for you up in Azure, or you can host that yourself either in your own Azure subscription or on premises. So let's actually start with sort of a chronology of how you can do extranets in Office 365. And the first feature I want to talk about is Office 365 external sharing. This one's been around for quite a while, probably maybe 4 years or so now. The feature has been there and available, and improvements have been made. And certainly with the latest Azure AD updates, they've actually provided some additional benefits to the out-of-the-box external sharing in Office 365. Basically, when you're in your SharePoint portal, you can click the share link and you can put in an external email address, and it will initiate that external sharing. You can turn it on or off. If you don't want people to be using it, you can turn it off across the tenant. You can also decide who has the permission rights to manage permissions. So they do need to have permissions rights in SharePoint. That can open up some challenges just from a governance point of view. If you allow people to manage permissions too broadly, your SharePoint portal can get a little bit out of hand. So there are some governance challenges from that point of view. It is really still more of a lightweight solution in terms of using this for a full production, broad extranet solution, but an option to consider. Next, let's talk about Azure AD B2B. So this is not specific to Office 365 or SharePoint Online. It's under the hood in Azure Active Directory. And under every SharePoint Online Office 365 tenant, there is an Azure AD tenant provided as part of that as well. It's a free tenant. When you sign up for Office 365, you can convert that into a paid subscription if you want to invoke any of the premium features, either in Azure AD or in the subscription as a whole. But from a B2B point of view, it's quite simple to use. I mean, your partners are invited into your Azure AD, and they either use an existing Azure AD account or they create one through the invitation. And you can manage permissions through the Azure AD groups, which is our recommendation. And I'll actually show you a walkthrough of what this looks like. It's secure. You're controlling all access through your own Azure AD directory. So if you remove a partner user from your Azure AD, their access is immediately revoked. Also, though, quite nice is that if a partner leaves that partner organization, you may not know about that, but as soon as they no longer have access to their partner account in that other organization, they also lose access into your portal as well. This has always been a big challenge in extranets, where you've got users who are staff in other organizations coming into your extranet. you're typically not going to be notified when those staff leave those organizations. So you quite often end up with these orphan accounts out there. And if that partner still has the credentials for it, they can still access your extranet even though they no longer work for that organization. In this scenario here, since they're authenticating through their partner organization, as soon as that's shut down, it's shut down not only for access to their own corporate resources, but also to your extranet as well. So that's a nice bonus here. Now, partner companies who need to come in don't have to have Azure AD. If they don't, it actually goes through a sign-up experience to create an Azure AD tenant and an account and password and such for them. And we'll walk you through what that scenario looks like as well. So some big announcements the week before last at Microsoft Ignite. Sarat, who is the product manager for Azure B2B out in Redmond, announced a number of pretty big things. So some of the new features that we got was that there's now support in the new Azure portal. So if you're familiar with Azure, there's two portals. There's an old and a new one. Previously, we had to do all the work for B2B through the old portal. And if we wanted to invite users in, we had to fill out this comma separated value Excel file with a somewhat cryptic information uploaded into the portal, and that would send the invitations out for the users. We don't need to do that anymore. We can actually go to the new portal, a much better user experience for adding individual users and going through and sending out those invitations for them. Another very big one is support for consumer email addresses. So when B2B first launched last year, they explicitly blocked any consumer email address. So if you were using a Hotmail account or Gmail account, anything like that, you weren't able to be invited in through B2B because it was intended as a business to business. Microsoft recognizes that there are a lot of individuals that do business, maybe they're sole proprietors or independent contractors. They don't have their own email domain, but there is a need to collaborate from a business point of view. So they have now extended support into consumer email addresses. What happens under the hood is that account, if it's not already a Microsoft account, takes you through a process to convert that to a Microsoft account. And I'll show you what that looks like. A very big one for us is an API for building out our customizations. So the ability to do the invitations, to send out the email communications ourselves is now possible through the Graph API. So we're actually busy working on a new version of EUM. We released a B2B version of User Manager just before Ignite, and what it did was it basically drove the pages of the old Azure portal in order to invite the users in. Obviously, that's not ideal. We knew there was an API coming. We were very keen to see that. So when that was announced down at Ignite, we were quite excited about that. And we've since fired up the development team and busy building the new version of EUM, which should be out by the beginning of November. That's going to have the full API support for that. If you're curious about the details from that session down at Ignite, the links are down on the page here. The first link takes you to the Ignite session itself. For some reason, the recording is not linked off of that Ignite page, but if you go up to YouTube, you can see the link there that takes you to the full recording of the session as well. So let's talk more specifically about Azure AD B2B and Office 365. So the idea here is that if you've invited somebody into your Azure AD tenant as a partner, you can grant them access in your SharePoint Online. And these users are then considered external users by Microsoft. That means they don't need a subscription for that, and you can invite in as many external users as you want without incurring any additional costs on your Office 365 side of things. Now you can apply permissions in SharePoint Online directly to those users, but we're a fan of using groups to manage permissions in SharePoint, so our preference is to make those users members of Azure AD groups and then grant permissions in SharePoint Online to the Azure AD groups themselves. The benefit there is that you can set up your site permission structure against those groups, and then ideally you'd be able to let the business owners themselves manage the membership of the Azure AD groups so they can invite people in from there. Now you can't do that today out of the box with the native Azure AD experience, but certainly that's a big benefit of using our Extranet User Manager on top of that. So site owners can manage that group membership through EUM ultimately and provide a well-governed solution from that perspective. So there's a couple of different experiences for users coming in who have been invited into an Office 365 or an Azure AD portal. So the first is I have an existing Office 365 account or I'm already an Azure AD user. And this is really the ideal situation because you don't need to create any account. There's no new password associated with that. Basically, you log into the portal that you've been invited into with your Azure AD credentials to accept the invitation, and you're done. It's very simple. It's single sign-on, very seamless from that point of view. Now, let's say that your business has its own email domain, but you're not set up in Azure AD. You're not doing anything with Microsoft. You don't have Office 365. You don't have Azure AD. How does that work? Well, what happens is when the first person from that organization gets invited in, behind the scenes, Microsoft actually creates an Azure AD tenant for that organization. And then it will prompt the user to create a password. They can provide some simple profiling information, and they can log in with that account from there. Now, if they forget their password, Azure AD provides password reset requirements through that, and away you go from there. As other people from that organization accept invitations, they're going to get attached to that existing tenant, but they're effectively going to go through the same process of creating a password and creating their account from there. Now, let's say at some point in the future, after you've accepted those invitations, that organization decides they want to be in Office 365 or they want to set up Azure AD. It's actually the same process that you would go through for registering a new domain. So you would go into your admin portal, and you would actually declare ownership of that domain. And what you need to do is prove that you own that domain. And there's some text records that Microsoft will provide to you that you need to put into your DNS settings. And basically that proves that you have administrator rights over that domain, and they'll let you take ownership of that. Once that's happened, the cloud accounts that already exist for people that have accepted invitations can continue to function the way they did before, or you could decide, you know what, we're going to do a password sync from our on-premises Active Directory, or we're actually going to set up single sign-on with ADFS and manage those accounts that way. So it's a very seamless experience, both from an initial onboarding point of view as well as a transition into a fully managed Azure AD tenant. Now, the third scenario is the new one. This is for couldn't do this in B2B prior to last week or the week before last announcements around support for that. And what happens here is obviously they're not going to create an Azure AD tenant for Gmail or for Hotmail. That's a very broad consumer tenant. What they do is they actually request you to convert that into a Microsoft account in the background. Now, if it's already a Microsoft account, like a Hotmail account or an Outlook.com account is inherently a Microsoft account already, you don't need to do anything in there. You just sign in with that account and go. If it's a Gmail account, maybe a consumer ISP account. Up here in Canada, we've got Rogers.com or Bell that provides email addresses. Those are considered consumer emails as well. Those force you to convert them into a Microsoft account. So again, you set a password for that. You go through the validation process on that. So what I'd like to do right now is take a quick pause on the presentation and actually walk you through what that experience is like going with the new native B2B experience. So no Extranet User Manager, just out of the box Microsoft Azure B2B. So I'm going to open up a couple of different windows here. So the first one I want to go to is my Azure AD tenant. So I'm using an EUMdemo.com Office 365 tenant. We'll show you more on that in a minute. And I'm in the new portal.azure.com logged in under that tenant. So we can see down here, we now have an Azure Active Directory section I can open up. And I can see my users and groups. And I can go in and look at all my users that are currently in my Azure AD. And a lot of these you can see have different email domains on the end of them. Those are the partner accounts or guest accounts that we brought in through here. So let's say I want to invite a net new person. I'm going to click on the add link here to add a new user. Let me just come over to my notes here, grab the email that I'm going to use for this. I'm actually going to use a Gmail account. So this is a brand new Gmail account that I've only just created. There's no Microsoft account behind it, and it's never been invited into B2B. So it's going to take you through the whole experience of what that looks like. Let me spell that right. There we go. So I just need a name and a username for that. I could optionally fill in some profile information if I wanted to. And I mentioned we'd like to use groups. So I'm going to click on the group section here. Give it a sec to pull up the list of groups. And this EUM_SharePoint group is what we've actually granted permissions in our SharePoint Online to. So let me go ahead and create that account. So you can see there it's inviting user. It knows this is a guest account based on the email domain, and it successfully invited that user in. Okay. So let me come over to another screen here. It may take a minute for it to come through, but I'm now in that Peter Carson Demo 3 Gmail account. So we can see a new email just came through from Microsoft inviting us into their application. Now, you can customize this email. I'm using the out-of-the-box one from Microsoft, and we'll talk later about how we can actually take over this whole experience and send our own email out through Extranet User Manager. But for now, we're going to use the native experience, and we're going to say, okay, I want to click on this link here to redeem that invitation. So now it's taking me over to invitations.microsoft.com, and it's explaining to me that, hey, you'll need a Microsoft account, which I don't currently have associated with that Gmail address, in order to proceed. So I say next. And it wants me to sign in with my Microsoft account, which I don't actually have just yet. So I need to actually create that account first. So I need to pick a password to use for that account. So this is separate from the password I use for Gmail because this is Microsoft, not Google. Let's go ahead and create that account. Now, it wants to validate that I actually own that email address before it'll create the Microsoft account. It's going to send a second email to me with a validation code. This one tends to take a minute or so to sometimes come through. Oh, demo gods were shining on me. Came right through. 1195 is my code that I need to use here. I go ahead and enter that in. And I've now validated my account. And that's going to continue with the onboarding process. Now, because I did the invitation through the Azure portal, it's actually taking me as the Gmail user back into that Azure portal. I don't have rights to do anything. I can't actually work with it because I'm not an administrator in Azure. It's a little bit confusing for me as a user. So that's why we want to take over that invitation process, because we want to drive them into a separate spot from there. So let's actually go to where we want to go through there. If I grab another link here, let's just paste that in. So I'm going to go to eumdemo.sharepoint.com. That's our Office 365 SharePoint Online tenant that we want to invite the people into. And you can see, boom, I'm right in. Because I've already logged in to Azure AD, SharePoint Online is not going to prompt me to log in another time from there. So I'm logged in as that Peter Carson Gmail account that I created, and I'm good to go from that point of view. Now, my rights are fairly limited in here. I can look at the site contents. I have reader access in through here, and that's about it. If we look back on one of my other windows here, bear with me for a sec. So I'm actually logged in as the administrator through this browser window. When I come in here, I see a much larger set of settings through here. If I come into my site settings and down into my permissions, we can see that this EUM_SharePoint domain group, that's actually the Azure AD group that I made the user a member of when I invited them in. So I didn't need to do anything with the permissions for them. I just put them into that group, and that gave them the rights to come into SharePoint Online. If I come back to the main site here, a couple other differences to call out from here. You'll notice I'm logged in as a full Office 365 user in this window here. I've got my app launcher. I've got all my different features of Office 365 that I can access. If I come back to my partner window here where I'm in with my Gmail, I just have SharePoint Online. So I've got no app launcher because I don't have an inbox, a mail, a calendar, any of the other Office 365 features. It's just allowing me into SharePoint Online. It's actually what I want. I don't want to set up another mailbox for this user. I just want them to be able to come into this site, retrieve what they need to be able to, or if I've granted them contribute permissions, to be able to work with what's in there. So that's sort of the out-of-the-box experience from there. And actually, let me just close out of here for a second. Make sure I've got the right windows going. And I'm going to open up another private window. Let me just go back to that eumdemo.sharepoint.com. So I've now been invited in, I'm working on that site, and I'm coming back to the site sometime later. So I need to enter my email address that I registered with. Let me put in that Gmail account and tap off of that. You notice here, it's taking me to the Microsoft account sign-in page. So I need to log in with that Microsoft account that I created under this Gmail. So that password that I set when I started the process, You can see here there's links to, if I can't access my account, it allows me to reset and such. That's standard Microsoft account features. I go through the login, and boom, now I'm back into my site from there. So it's a fairly seamless experience once you've gone through that invitation initially. Okay, let's come back to our presentation deck here. So that's the out-of-the-box experience. What are some of the limitations there? Well, first is that you need to be an Azure Global Administrator in order to invite B2B users in. So that's typically a very select group of people. It's a highly privileged role. You're not going to let your business users have the keys to that. Now, Microsoft is planning delegation, and they have a roadmap. They don't have specific timing on it, but it was something that they talked about at Ignite, that there will be the ability to delegate access in the future, but not sure what sort of granularity that you're going to have there. It may be an all or nothing, that once you delegate user management into Azure AD, they can manage all of the users in there. And that's maybe not the scenario that we want in all situations. It does need to be managed through the Azure portal. It's fine for an administrator to come into that, but if we come back, sorry, too many windows going here, into here, I mean, this portal can be a little overwhelming for people. I find it somewhat confusing, particularly as I flip back and forth between the old and the new portals. Microsoft's doing a great job at cleaning that up, but it's still maybe a little bit too much for people who all they want to do is be able to invite in external users through them. There is no self-registration or approval process, so you basically have to do an invitation style process. So we provide that self-registration, and I'll show you what that looks like. And there's no integration to other line of business systems. If we want to do deeper profile management, I showed you the profile page in there. It's pretty limited in terms of the fields that we're capturing there. We typically have a much broader profile that we want to capture as part of those external users. And we often integrate that into CRM systems, Dynamic CRM or Salesforce, and such from that point of view. So it's some of the limitations from that perspective. So let's switch gears now and talk about Extranet User Manager, which layers on top of that. Its main goal is really around that delegation. It's intended to be very simple for both the business owners and the external users in terms of how do I invite people in, how do I allow people to register and approve them. Forgotten password reset, obviously that's dealt with on the Microsoft side in the B2B scenario. And a simplified login, again, dealt with on the B2B side. But the product itself isn't just for B2B. You can actually create on-premise accounts or SQL accounts as well. We're not going to talk about that today, but in the future, we're planning on some interesting pieces around creating hybrid accounts where you actually create a B2B partner account and an on-premise Active Directory account. You can actually link those two together, and there's some new features with Azure Application Proxy, actually allows single sign-on through your partner credentials, not just into Office 365, but into your on-premise applications as well. So we're not quite there yet. That's sort of beyond the initial B2B release that we're going to be doing, but we're pretty keen on what that all looks like as well. So if we look at EUM and Azure B2B together, so we provide the self-registration and the profile management and that ability to delegate. And not just all or nothing, but to be able to say, you know what, that EUM SharePoint group that we were granting permissions through, maybe I want to delegate somebody ownership just of that group. And they only see people that are in that group, and they can only add people to that group. That's something that's not possible today through the B2B portal from Microsoft. It's a scenario that we see all the time in our clients where they have different styles of extranet sites for different purposes, different ownership of those, and they want to segregate who manages which. And maybe they even want to delegate outside of the organization, so you can actually have the partner manage the accounts. How do we secure that? Allow the partner to only see their partner users and not other partners. So as business owners are creating users and groups under the hood, we're creating those same users and groups in Azure Active Directory. Today we're accessing the old portal, doing some automation of that. As I mentioned, by the beginning of November, we'll have the new release out. We'll be going through the new Graph API that was released the week before last in order to manage that. Also, part of that will then be able to manage the invitations themselves. So rather than Microsoft sending that email out, we already have capability in Extranet User Manager for doing customizations of the welcome emails. We can make those the emails that get sent out for the invitation process. And we can make it more seamless so that users are driven directly back into the particular site they're being invited into. Azure AD manages the login process, as I showed you in the second scenario where I logged in with that Gmail account, but we manage the group membership and the permission side of that. So that's kind of the fit between the two products and how we layer on top of what comes out of the box. So let's talk more about features of Extranet User Manager. So first is branding. Brand is very important. Most of our clients invest a lot in their brand, and they want that throughout the entire user experience. So registration, all the end user pages, and to a certain degree, we can even do that on the Azure B2B pages as well. We can modify some of the branding so it doesn't feel so Microsoft-y, although it is still a Microsoft URL that they're going through from that point of view. But it's important to control as much of that through that whole experience. Self-registration is a big deal. A lot of our clients have broad external user bases, and they want to allow any number of users to be able to self-discover and come in through there. So let me actually take you through a couple of examples of that. So if I come back to, let me think about this. Which browser do I want to use? I'll use this one here. So if I go to, say, Public Health Ontario, this is a public-facing website that we helped build for PHO. It's built on SharePoint 2010, and it has our Extranet User Manager around the registration process for that. If I click on the register link here, it's going to take me into a custom registration form that lets me enter my details and go ahead and continue with the subscription from there. Now in PHO's case, this is intended for what they call the Tier 1 users. Anybody can sign up and immediately get an account on the system. It doesn't expose anything additional from a security point of view on the site. It just allows you to interact as a named user. So if you're, say, going into a discussion forum or interacting with forums and things like that, the system then knows who you are and can make that part of that experience. There is the ability beyond this to say, we want to have upper tier users that maybe belong to municipal public health organizations. They go through an additional approval step behind the scenes for that. Let's actually have a look at a couple different ones here. So if I go to Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, this is one near and dear to our heart. We've been working with them for many years here, built their public-facing site, also on SharePoint 2010. And again, we've got a members link here, primarily targeted to volunteers and of the clubs. So as a national organization, they're quite small. There are only about 25 people working in the national office. But there's over 100 clubs across the country. There's several thousand staff that work at those clubs. So I can come in through here and say I want to register for an account, enter my information in, actually enter my own approver email, which at first glance seems a little odd, but the idea is we wanted to make this a very organic growth experience, that anybody who's already a member of the portal can vouch for anybody else. So if you work at a club and somebody else has access to the portal, you say, hey dude, do you mind if I use you as an approver? I'm going to sign up for an account. That person who knows you says, yes, okay, they click the approve button, and you're now a member of the portal as well, which means you can then approve somebody else from there. So it becomes very organic from that perspective. A bunch of demographic background in terms of your relationship with Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada is captured as part of this, and this is all fed into their dynamic CRM as well, so that gets kept up to date as well as part of that. A couple more I want to go over just for different scenarios. ocas.sharepoint.com is a client of ours who's live today in Office 365. They are the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies. So they're the umbrella organization on top of, and I need to go to an in-private window. Hang on a sec. Let's see here, which browser? Oh, that one. Yeah, let me just sign out here. One of the challenges with Office 365 is you can't be multiple people in the same browser. This is actually something that B2B really helps with, because you don't actually need to log in as different people. You use that one credential across all. Okay, so it's taking me to the sign-in page. In this case, we're not using B2B. We're considering moving to it. We're actually creating on-premise accounts and granting permissions for them. In OCAS's case, because they're a registered charity, they don't pay for subscriptions, so it wasn't as big an issue in terms of creating subscriptions for those users. They get a large grant through TechSoup to use for that. But there will be advantages with single sign-on to move them to B2B now that it's maturing. If I click on the link here to register on their site, it takes them to their custom registration form. Again, it's specific to their member societies. I pick the organization I belong to and my role within that. It knows where that is. And here you'll note we have an auto approval. So if you register with the email address associated with your organization and we see that that matches, we're just going to auto approve you. So if you have the right email domain for Brand, Family, and Children's Services, boom, you're in and away you go. Nobody needs to look at that record. If you say, you know what, I'm coming from other, and I put in some, say, rogers.com email domain, something like that, or Hotmail or Outlook, it doesn't know that you actually should have access. It's going to go through an approval process. So it actually sends an email to somebody at OCAST to say, hey, somebody new registered here, you need to approve their account before they can complete their registration. Okay. What was the last one I wanted to show you? Probably Kinross is a good one. So Kinross Gold is a global mining gold company. They work with about 6,000 different vendors around the world, and this is for those suppliers to go through the onboarding and validation process. So if they've already got an account, they can go ahead and log in, and they're logging into a SharePoint 2013 portal that's hosted up in Azure. If they haven't, they can go ahead and click the Register Now link and go through the registration process. I need to identify what supplier I'm from. So you actually need to be a supplier of Kinross to be able to proceed through. I start typing in Envision IT. It says, oh, I find you. It's actually doing a lookup into J.D. Edwards, their ERP system, and then continue down through the process from there. So I'll take you through the whole process. But you can see this is a highly customized registration as part of that. So that whole experience can very much be tailored through there. And we actually include the full Visual Studio source code for that. If you want to do those customizations yourself, you're more than welcome to go ahead and do that. Okay, delegation, I mentioned at the beginning, is a key feature of Extranet User Manager. This idea that business owners, either within the organization or even external to the organization, can manage groups of users. And IT doesn't become a gatekeeper in that process. So I'll show you in a minute what this looks like, but that idea to be able to delegate that access down is key to EUM. Adaptive design, so all the pages that we're looking at. Now let me actually bring up our out-of-the-box registration form. Which browser do I have that in here? There we go. So this is my desktop view of the form. If I pull the screen down, as I get into tablet mode or into smartphone mode, we're using Bootstrap under the hood to give a responsive interface for that. So whether I'm on my smartphone, my tablet, or my desktop, I get a nice tailored experience through all that. And the same is true of any customizations that we do on those forms. I mentioned before, it can be hosted up in Azure, or it can go on premises. The installation requirements are pretty minimal. It doesn't install into SharePoint itself. Obviously we can't do that in SharePoint Online, but we don't do that on premise either. Basically, we just need an IS server to install it into. If you choose to, you could put it on the SharePoint server itself. I actually prefer that you spin up a separate VM for that if you're going to do it on premises. It just isolates any dependencies there. So as you upgrade your SharePoint server environment, which happens periodically, you don't need to change anything from an EUM point of view because it's very much separated from that. From the hosted point of view, I mentioned we have a multi-tenant hosting offering. So we manage that for you. We've got a third-party organization that does 7/24 monitoring and remediation for us to make sure that that's up and running and available for them. So if you don't want to run any infrastructure, which is typically the case if you're in Office 365, we can take care of that side for you as well. Multilingual, we're here in Canada, so obviously English and French is a very important thing for us, but clients around the world translated into many different languages. We use resource files to make it easy to do that translation. And again, those are available to you, so if you want to do the translation yourself, you're more than welcome to go ahead and do that. All right, so let's switch gears and talk for a minute around governance and permissions. And this is a big driver for using Extranet User Manager. So governance is something you really need to think about as part of any Office 365 project, whether it's an extranet, an intranet, a staff portal, communications portal, doesn't matter. It needs to be there. You need to define the roles and responsibilities for the folks within your organization. It's not just who's allowed to do what, but what you should do. What are the best practices and principles? What are the training we're going to provide to make sure that it's used appropriately and it's going to be successful within the organization? And permissions are typically a key part of that. If you don't manage them properly, you end up with a mess. And we see this when we're doing upgrades on existing SharePoints where we weren't involved initially. Permissions are broken all over the place, and nobody really has a clear understanding of who has access to what. So really locking that down, but still providing the ability to do what people need to do is the key balance you need to strike from a governance point of view. So if we think about permissions for a second, I mean, you can apply permissions at any level in SharePoint. You can apply it at the site, at the list or library level, folders within the libraries, or even down at the item level. And generally, from a good governance practice, we strongly encourage you to only manage it at the site list. As you get deeper into that, it can get pretty confusing. There's business reasons why you might want to at the folder at the item level, but you want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So how do you apply permissions in SharePoint? Well, you can apply them to individual users or to groups. And groups, again, are what we strongly recommend. The groups can mean a lot of different things. It could be a SharePoint group, could be an Office 365 group, and there's some really cool things coming out of Microsoft around groups in Office 365. I'll look for a talk from us probably in the next month or so on that topic. Or it can be an Azure AD group, which is what I showed you as I was inviting that Gmail account. Cloud-only group, or it could actually be a mirror of an on-premise Active Directory group or an EUM group that we set up through our products. So try and make sure that you manage permissions through groups, which is a key tenet of EUM. So if you think about this, who needs to manage permissions should be different than who manages the group membership. If you're, maybe I'm in the IT organization, you're a business owner and you want to spin up an extranet site. Maybe I've created a site provisioning process where you can fill out a form and request your site and get it, and permissions all get applied, or I do that manually for you. I create the site and I apply permissions to the group. If I give you rights to manage the membership of that group, basically you should be able to do everything that you need to do. You've got your site there, it's set up in an appropriate way, and you can invite in whoever you want into that group to have access to the site. I'm not giving you the keys to manage the permission. We want to control that a little more tightly. But ideally, the business should own the group membership. You shouldn't have to come to me to say, hey, can you add a new person, or can you take somebody out as the group membership changes. Okay, so what does all this cost? How do we license Extranet User Manager? Well, there's two flavors, and there's two ways to host the product. So there's a standard and an enterprise. We get into the full details up on our website. Basically, the main difference is, are you doing single sign-on into multiple systems, or is it just one system that you're going into? And then the other question is, do you want to install it on premises with a more typical perpetual license and software assurance annually, or do you want us to host it for you? So you can see here the different pricing scenarios through there. For now, with if you're going to be leveraging B2B, really you're just looking at the standard edition, because you're just going to be coming into Azure Active Directory through there. I mentioned some future plans around syncing that to on-premise accounts and providing single sign-on into on-premise through those B2B accounts. That would take you into an enterprise edition when that feature is available. We provide that single sign-on for on-premise accounts today if you're not using the B2B feature. So a couple of different ways to slice and dice it. And certainly have to have a conversation and explore what that looks like for you. So I showed you a couple different clients. A few of them are up on the screen here: Boys and Girls Club, Kinross, Public Health Ontario, lots of different organizations, lots of different sectors, not-for-profits, government organizations, for-profit, education. We've got a bunch of new ones actually we're just getting going on. We need to add to the list through here as well. Okay, so let's actually take you through a live demo of what this looks like. And I'm going to try something new here. I'm actually going to send out a URL. And anybody who's game to try, I'd like you to follow along with me and go through that registration process. So in your chat window on the GoToMeeting, I'll just get that link to go out. Hang on. That doesn't seem to want to copy and paste. Let me try that one more time. There we go. So if you go ahead and click on that link, and I'm going to do the same thing myself here, just make sure that comes up, you come to this registration page here. This is our out-of-the-box registration experience. Obviously, you saw a number of variations from a customization point of view on that that we can adapt as part of that. So let me put in my demo information. And I'm going to use, let me see here. Okay, so I've got a demo account. I can fill in the other information or leave it optionally off, and I have to answer the CAPTCHA down here. Let me see if I get this one right. Actually, the same words, that was pretty easy. And what this is doing is it's entering a record into Extranet User Manager as a pending approval account. So we've set up a simple email confirmation. We don't have multiple approver groups. It's all going to my inbox. So I'm going to be getting an email to say, hey, somebody just registered on the account. I'm also going to get an email as the user registering, thanking for registering, letting them know that they should have an account shortly through there. Actually, let me flip to the browser here. Right here. So I'm actually using Mailinator for test emails here. So we can see here is my PDemo7 account that I just created, and we've got an account request for the Extranet. Thanks for requesting the account. Once it's approved, you'll receive an email to set your password. That wording actually needs a little bit of change because we're actually going to take them through the B2B experience through there. Okay, let's come back. Let's actually go into our portal. So first off, what I want to look for is just pending approval users. Let me do a search of that. We'll see what comes back. So I should see my demo account, as well as if anybody's had a chance to register themselves, we should see your accounts in there too. No, it's just taking a little while for some reason. I think I left it open too long. Hang on, let me just, yeah, it logged me out. Bear with me a sec. Okay, so I want to turn off all those ones, do my search, that's better. Okay, we've got a couple people through there. What I'm going to do first is go into my account. So right now, the registration process doesn't automatically put me into a group. So doing a bulk approval is not going to work properly through here because I need to put each user into that EUM SharePoint group. Actually, you know what I can do? Sorry, bear with me a second here. I'll take a different path through. So let me actually open up that EUM SharePoint group. And from this perspective, I can add members to it. So if I look for my pending approval users through here, there's my 4 users that I've got, another registration through there. It's going to make all those pending approval users a member of that group. Now those users don't actually exist yet from Azure AD's point of view because we haven't sent the invitations across there. So what I need to do is now set those users all to be active. So I'm going to do my search of users again, grab the pending approval ones, grab all of those. What I want to do is a bulk set of status on those. So I'm going to set all those users to be Azure B2B. Go ahead and set that, and that's now going to be creating the Azure AD accounts behind the scenes. Okay, so that's successfully gone through. Because we're still working against the old portal, I actually need to run a backend process, takes those users and uploads them up into Azure AD. So give that a second to run. And actually what I can do while that's going is flip over to my Azure AD window here. Let me just come back to my all users. If I do search through here, I should see those new users showing up. I think I did that too quickly. Let me just try that one more time. Yeah, there's my Peter Demo 7 account that I just created. You would normally need to go into the Azure AD portal, but I wanted to show you behind the scenes what was actually happening as part of that. Okay, So now what's happened is Microsoft has sent an invitation out to me to say, hey, you've been invited into the portal. So apologies on all the browser windows that I've got going on here, but I'm wearing a lot of different hats. So if I come back to my private domain here, we can see here there's a new email that just came in inviting me to use their app. So I click on that link, go into the invitations, and it's explained to me here to access apps, you need to set up that as an account with Microsoft. Now this EUM.co I've already used, so there's an Azure AD tenant already there, but this particular account doesn't exist in that tenant just yet. If I hit next, and it wants me to create a password for that account. So I have to satisfy the Azure AD requirements around that. Go ahead and hit next. And again, it wants to know that I actually own that email address. So it's going to send me a verification code, similar to what we saw in the first scenario when we were going through the Microsoft account. But here we're not actually creating a Microsoft account. We're actually creating an Azure AD in that EUM.co tenant. Here, verify your email address. If I grab this link here, and go ahead and put that verification code in, finish. It's now finishing up creating that Azure AD account for me because I didn't have one in there previously. And at the end of that process, it should take me through to the SharePoint Online portal itself. Waiting, there we go. Okay, so I'm actually not logged in yet. I've just created the account, so I have to use that same password that I had previously set. Finishing off the last bit through there. Now this is the problem I've still got open with Microsoft, that if you accept the invitation too quickly, sometimes things don't sync down into SharePoint Online, and it doesn't actually know who you are. So sorry, you're not in the directory from there. So this is not something that we can control. It's something that Microsoft needs to address, or one of my thoughts is maybe we can just delay sending the emails out when we've got control of the email to allow that propagation to happen. But what I can do, if I come back to my invitation email, go ahead and click on that link again. It's still complaining. Usually, within about a minute or so, it will provide that access through. Maybe what we'll do is come back to that account and have a look at that. So it successfully logged me into SharePoint Online, but it doesn't understand the permissions just yet. For those of you that have gone through that registration process, you should have got the same invitation emails. Not sure whether you have Azure AD tenant set up for those accounts or not, or exactly which of those three experiences you're going to go through there. I want to take you quickly through one more experience as well. I want to talk a bit more about the Extranet User Manager product and what we have in here. So right now I'm logged in as what's called a configuration editor. So I have the ability to do things like configure that email that's going to go out. Currently we're not doing that in B2B, but as soon as we've got the API in there, we will be doing that. The ability to add and edit both users and groups, which I showed you both of those examples. If I have a bulk set of users, I can upload a CSV of users to mass load those. And then most of the other features are administrator only. Now, if I've delegated access down, when we looked at the groups here for a second and we went into that EUM SharePoint group, it doesn't currently have an owner associated with it. But what I can do is I can add a user or a group as an owner of a group. And what that means is those group owners, when they log in here, they don't see all the configuration options, those all disappear, but they still see the option to search, add, and import users into there. So they have the ability to manage the membership of the group that they own. We also have a role called Group Editor, which then lights up the features to be able to add and edit groups themselves. You may not want to give that to all users in your organization, but there may be key people outside of IT that it makes sense to allow them to create groups as well as to manage the membership of groups. So there's different roles through there. I actually want to take you through one more adding user role. So rather than going through a self-registration, you can directly add a user through the portal here. What I'm going to do is actually add my main email address, which I've deleted and cleared from this system. I'll set the status as B2B, put them in that group, quick double check, that all looks right, and go. And what I want to do is take you through the experience of somebody who's an Office 365 user, which is really the slickest experience through there. The first thing I got to do is sync that up into Azure AD. That's just uploading through there. While we're waiting for that, I'm logged into my Office 365 corporate portal here. So I'm in the Envision IT, Office 365. We've got a wide-ranging portal. I've got access to my inbox, my calendar, SharePoint, Delve, all the different features through there. So what I'm waiting for is the email invitation from Microsoft, and it should take me right through that process through there. So let's have a look here. Just waiting for that to come through. Again, sometimes it takes a minute for the emails to propagate through. There we go. Okay, so I've got my invitation here. Chrome is my main browser. That's my default browser. When I click the link, it's going to take me over into that. So I click on that link for the invitation. I'm already signed into my Office 365. It's just telling me that I need to use the same account. Well, that is the account that I'm signed in with. I hit next. It didn't ask me to convert the account, didn't ask me anything about a password because I'm already signed into my main Office 365 tenant. And boom, I'm through into there. Now I'm still having the same issue where it's taking a little while for the permissions to grant through to get me into the SharePoint Online. That's something we're going to need to resolve with Microsoft. Let's actually have a look back to my Mailinator session. Where are we here? See if this one has let me through now. No, that's still not going through. No, I guess there's a propagation delay still going on there. But the idea is that I should be able to just get right into the eumdemo.sharepoint.com. I didn't need to use any additional credentials. I'm using the same credentials from my native Office 365 tenant. So from an external user's point of view, that experience is pretty nice. I don't need to open it in a private window, log in as somebody else. I just click the link and away I go through from there. Let's come back to the deck. I think we're pretty much through here. I'm taking you through the demo scenario. We've got all the links in here that we use for that. I'm using ADFS for my account, so that's how I signed in, and ultimately when I'm going into that eumdemo.sharepoint.com tenant, I'm using my corporate ADFS credentials through there. Okay, we're pretty much at the top of the hour again, so why don't we wrap up there. From a next steps point of view, if you're interested in a deeper one-on-one session, you'd like to talk about setting up a trial, by all means reach out to Logan Guest. He's online. He'll be sending out a follow-up email to all the attendees as well. Or if you're looking for more product information, more trial versions from there. A couple of upcoming things. If you're in the Toronto area, I'm doing a Ignite follow-up panel session next week, downtown, 6 to 8 p.m. Going to be out at the MVP Global Summit if you're an MVP. Also going to be presenting at both SB TechCon and SharePoint Fest Chicago the first week in December. So if you're looking for us, we're going to have booths at both those events there as well. Come out and say hello. A couple of links here. As I mentioned, the deck will be available up on our event site, and you're good to go from there. So we don't really have a whole lot of time for questions from there. Logan or Amanda, I don't know if there was specific questions that we wanted to try and answer here.
No, we didn't have any unanswered questions, Peter.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day and look forward to talking again soon. Thanks, bye.